And with that in mind, hopefully now if I turn it back to Lana, this won't mess up anything else. Okay, here we go. Lana.
Okay.
That was a Roy Orbison song.
Okay, so I'm gonna
There we go. Okay.
share my screen. Okay, guys, can you see my screen?
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately, my situation, I'm working on the laptop and it's kind of hard. So I'm gonna turn off my camera for the duration of this show. So I could just use a keyboard, and I hope you forgive me for that. And so we're just gonna do this. Okay, first of all, thank you for coming here on Sunday. It's very nice meeting you all. Some of them we've met in the past. I see lots of new faces. It's just great to hear that we still have life happening in spite of COVID and all other challenges that are happening in the world right now. And so I just want to say thank you for letting me to present my research. I'm an astrologer residing in Northern California. I've been doing astrology for 25 years. And eclipses, one of my interests. I got really interested with this topic about time of February, where I noticed there were several, shows on eclipses, and they were all very, very dark. It was all about gloom and doom and end of the world, and I just thought, we need some healing here. So I'm not a mundane astrologer. I'm into personal, natal astrology, and I'm interested also in spiritual astrology. So I thought I'll just do a research on eclipses and see how I can give them, different perspective. And as a part of this, I discovered that some, interesting people that are born on eclipse, and I just thought that I'll dive into it. So there is this ancient saying that kings and queens are born and die during eclipses, and I just thought, well, that's a good start. And then, I've learned that quite a few people in the royalties that were born on eclipses. But I just thought there are also some regular people that are born on eclipse, and so how life, is treating them, what makes them different. I actually had a couple clients that were born on eclipses, but unfortunately, I can't share I can share their charts with you since I didn't have their permission. So we're just going to work on famous people. And so I wanted to start my show with what do we think of people born on eclipse? Well, the things that we hear about them, that they're natural leaders and they have strong personalities, highly intuitive. Some say they have paranormal abilities and have important mission to fulfill in their life. They have karmic responsibilities. Some of them have life full of drama. And also, some people say that they struggle against difficulties and adversities and feel different from each other, from others, and feel alienated. And some people said that they feel like their life is spinning out of control and they feel victimized and fatalistic. So I just thought, well, perhaps we can investigate some charts and see if we can find these qualities in these people. But before we get into charts, I wanted to take some time and work about and talk about eclipse. So what is eclipse? See, there are probably quite a few people here that are seasoned astrologers and they know about eclipses. But I just thought that maybe there'll be some people here that don't have that much experience in astrology. So I would like to go over introducing lunar nodes. So lunar nodes, the orbital nodes of the moon, that is the point of orbit where the moon is closest to ecliptic. So you can see this from the picture. And so there are two of them, there are ascending node and descending node. It's interesting that some, especially in Vedic astrology, they call them the planets, but they're not physical planets, they're just points, of intersection of ecliptic. And so eclipses, occur near lunar nodes. And so the solar eclipses occur on the passage of moon through the node coincides with the new moon, and the lunar eclipses occurs when passage coincides with the full moon. So the lunar eclipse may occur if the full moon is within 11 degrees of celestial longitude of the node, and the solar eclipse may occur if there is a new moon within 17 degrees 25 minutes of node. So you see pictures here. They also have different names. Some say descending node, ascending node, south node, north node, head of the dragon, tail of the dragon, Rahu and Ketu. Well, so my next slide is, so what do they represent, the nodes? At least this is the way I approach them. So for me, the lunar nodes suggest that we come to this world with underdeveloped or overdeveloped aspects of our character. They point to these specific qualities. The south node, tail of the dragon, suggests that our overdeveloped character traits that are easy for us to pull back on, but that may undermine our lives if we hold in these traits for security. While the north node, which is also known as the head of the dragon, suggests that the qualities that we need to develop in order to find inner balance. And these are the guidelines that I use for assessment of the eclipse. And I've been following these guidelines. They are in the book of, you may know this astrologer who did lots of work on eclipses, Robert Karl Jansky, Interpreting the Eclipses. It's probably one of the most comprehensive books on eclipses that I found. So his guidelines are, and when you work with eclipses, to look is first, to look at what natal house eclipse hold. And, and then the second one, does eclipse fall into conjunction or opposition of the natal point in the chart? So he's using the orb of 5 degrees. And the third one is a Saros series, and that is very important, or it's also known as initial eclipse. And what is the nature of Sirius? And then, of course, he adds the fixed stars. Does eclipse fall in a conjunction with a fixed star? And at the exact time of the eclipse, were any fixed stars above the horizon? And the sixth one is, did umbra of the eclipse pass over geographic area in which native understudy lives or was born? And the seventh one is just to assess the strength of the eclipse itself. So we need to know if it's a partial, annular, or total. And for what period of time will this particular eclipse affect the life of individual? So these were the guidelines from Jansky. And this is something that I've been following in making eclipse assessments. So Saras cycle, and again, it's more of an advanced topic, and of course you can spend lots of time just discussing Saras cycle. So what is the Saras cycle? So each eclipse cycle belongs to a series, and they call the Saras series. So each Saras series has its own numbering sequence. The lunar eclipse cannot belong to the solar Saras series, and vice versa. Each Saras cycle series has a beginning and ending. The numbering system can get a little bit confusing because there is a numbering system that is used by astronomers, and they also call them the Saras series number, and then another one that is used by astrologers. At least I could not find for the second system any reference anywhere else, but just the astrology websites and astrology books. So the first one is known as Vandenberg Saras series, and it was discovered, well, that was not discovered, it was used by a Dutch astrologer, and it's starting in 1950, not astrologer, I'm sorry, he was an astronomer, starting in 1955. So here's an illustration of the eclipses here. The eclipses within single series move like slow, deliberate waves over the surface of the Earth. And more about Saras cycles, how they're being calculated. So, okay, the Saras series that astrologers use, they're more known as also a node families or node groups. There's 38 of them, and 19 north and 19 south. So the north and south, it tells us where the series began. Is it coming from the north or is it coming from the south? So we can see on this slide, there's some calculations on how they came up with these numbers. It's very interesting. Eclipse here, 346.62 days times 19. It's the number of 6,585 days, which is in the eclipse year, not the same as a solar year. So this is the number of days in entire Saras series, which is turned to 18 years, 11 days, and 8 hours. So you can find all these calculations in, I like this very much, enjoy this book by Bernadette Brady, The Eagle and the Lark, and also in Interpreting Eclipses by Jansky. So my first person born in eclipse is Karl Marx. I'm pretty sure you are all familiar with Karl Marx to some extent, and I was very much familiar with Karl Marx probably from the time I was 7 or 8 years old. I was born in Soviet Union, and in the Soviet schools we were pretty much indoctrinated with Marxism, and even as little children, we have to learn about Marx, who was the biggest influence on Lenin. And I know once I came to the United States, I think I momentarily blocked all the prior knowledge. I just wanted to forget it. But so since I started this research, I have to kind of refresh my memory about Marx and who was he and what was his importance. And I think I kind of got like a different angle on him, and sort of starting to looking at him from astrological lenses. So here's his chart. He was born May 5th, 1818, in Trier, Germany, and he was born. It was very interesting in earthy sign of Taurus, and he was born on Eclipse, which is in his second house. And it seems so much fitting, his teachings, and historical materialism. Just one thing that I remember, the buzzwords from my childhood about his theories, it was a theory of surplus value. So it's very interesting how his theory is so much fitting his chart. And it was interesting also that he's also known as, he developed his theory of political economics. And he is also described as one of the most influential figures in human history. He was born in a middle-class family, and lots of people, I remember saying, "Oh, Karl Marx was Jewish." Well, Karl Marx was not Jewish, but his family had Jewish roots. His father converted to be a Lutheran, and it happened after there was emancipation of Jews in Germany. And once it was it was reversed for his father, in order to stay in business, he needed to convert. So his father converted to Christianity, and Marx was interesting. Not he was an atheist, but the books that he wrote kind of became a form of religion. So Das Kapital, known as the Bible of socialism. And what I found interesting, that Marx and his theories apparently are very, very popular now. And Capital is one of the really wanted books. And it's interesting that people that are studying Marx now are economists. And I also found that even people in astrology also have a connection to it. And so one of the famous economists that was influenced by Marx was a Russian economist and mathematician, and his name was Nikolai Kondratiev. And astrologers that are studying the astroeconomics, I hear they studying his work and of business cycles. And so apparently business cycles were very much studied by Marx. And so this is how Marx connected to astrology. And here is the, before I go there, a few things here about his chart. So we can see that his eclipse is in a sign of Taurus, right? And interesting that the ruler of the eclipse is Venus, is also in the sign of Taurus, which is a sign of exaltation. And Mercury is in the sign of Gemini, which is in the sign of rulership. And it's in the third house of writing. So I think that kind of helps to understand why his writings were so popular. And he was, my understanding, he was a really good writer. And he was not just a writer of political economics, he was also a philosopher, and he wrote poetry. He was all around, very, educated man. So that's about his astrology. And the eclipse that he was born into, the path of the eclipse, you can see is kind of through Russia, Europe. So that kind of explains his influence on that area. And it's a Saras cycle, 18 south. No, I'm sorry. It's a 19 north. It's the Saras series 19 north. There were some interesting fixed stars in his chart. And one is the royal star, Aldebaran, that gives native high honors, integrity, popularity, courage, and warmongering and agitation, danger, loss of violence, and some call it fortunate. But if you use it properly, I don't think it was that fortunate for him during his life. His life was very, tragic. Most of his life he lived in exile, and he had 7 kids. Some of his kids died. He also had a problem with his health. He had a very unhealthy diet. He was workaholic. He worked 16-hour days. And so there's another interesting star, Menkar, and disease of throat, disgrace, ruin. And he was stateless. And he was exiled, from Germany. When he lived in France, he was pushed out of France. Most of his life he lived in London, and he's buried at Highgate Cemetery in London. So as I was saying, that the Saras cycle, and if you ever need to find the Saras cycle, if you use a solar fire, and this is what I use among other programs, you can go in the solar fire, you can go to Eclipse search screen, and you can just state the range of the dates, and it will show you all the eclipses that are happening at the period. And so you can see there's a Vanderberg series number, and then another one is the Saras number. And if you just open here, and so once we find the Saras number, and in Bernadette Brady's book of predictive astrology, she has the description of the series. And so every series has a theme. And this particular series, which is 19 North, has a theme of realism coming down to earth. So initial eclipse had the Neptune node, Venus, Jupiter square Sun. So individual will become aware of old situation and see it from the rather what is all it thought it was. It can be constructive time for tackling the truth. And this is from Bernadette Brady. What I found was interesting about Karl Marx, and he just created a theory, but the theory influenced Lenin, and you could see who altered his Marx theory to fit his needs and put it in the practical usage. And so Lenin put Marx theory into practice by establishing the socialist state with dictatorship of proletariat. And if you see the two charts together, Marx and Lenin, and you could see how Lenin's Mercury is exactly on the midpoint of Mark's eclipse point. So another guy also born under the sign of Taurus, pretty much in the second house of Mars. So he's taking his values, he's taking his theories and putting to his own usage. So I think at this point, I want to see if there are any questions that I can, answer and clarify before we continue with other charts. Okay, I guess I assume there are no questions so far.
I just had a really quick one. How important is the fixed stars? I'm not that familiar with all of them, but I mean, in this, what weight would you give them?
Well, you know what, I think the fixed stars, I think they are just enhancing
Okay.
the position. I think it's not just the fixed star, when you're interpreting the chart, entire chart is important. But fixed stars is just one of the points that will just enhance the interpretation. And if you could see.
Yeah, because some of them are much more intense than other ones.
That's right. And yeah.
Some so-called more fortunate, much more fortunate. So I just.
Right. So you could just see it here that there are some important stars, like Aldebaran. It's a royal star. It's a very, it's a big star, and then you can see there are other stars there and they're not so important. So, but I'm looking at the stars that are in conjunction with eclipse, or the ruler of the eclipse. So here it's this moon conjunct Menkar, which is kind of a very ominous, difficult star. And Sun is in parallel with Aldebaran. And Aldebaran it's just really big. It's success through integrity. And also since, he's ruled by Venus. And so I would also look at the mystical but judgmental. Here is the Alcyon.
Oh, okay.
Does it help?
Yes, I was trying to think of some of the more really super fortunate fixed stars. I'm not an expert on the fixed stars, but I'm just wondering. Yes, that does help. That does help. Thank you.
There are people that focus their entire reading on the stars. I think the stars are important, but not nearly as important as the planets. But it's just the enhancing the analysis.
Sure. Thank you very much.
So my second person is Alexandra, the Tsarina of Russia. And she was born in Germany. She was German. And she became the last Russian Tsarina. And she was born on June 6, 1872 in Germany. And it was very interesting that in 1872, shortly before her birth, Das Kapital was translated to Russian and published at the 3,000 books were published in Russia. It's a pretty big volume for that period. And it's also happened in the year of her birth. So what I'm trying to say that the history and people are connected. And she, was from a royal family of England. She was the granddaughter of Queen Victoria. And so she was born in Gemini, as a Gemini. Okay, so one important thing to see of these eclipses, where eclipse falls, north node or south node. So Marxist eclipse also falls on north node. So this is what you need to develop. And so is Alexandra. Her original name was Alix, and of Hessen. The name Alexandra, and she was known as Alexandra Fedorovna, she took when she married Russian Tsar Nicholas. So she had to change her name. She had to adapt to her new country. You know, they had a very interesting story. Their story was that, you know, usually all the royal marriages are influenced by family, you know, and they were in love. You know, she was in love with Nicholas. She met him when she was 12 years old. You know, she came to Russia for the wedding of her sister, and they liked each other, you know, and they continued their relationship you know, for 5 years. I believe they were corresponding. And 5 years when she was later, after when she was 17, she came to Russia again, and this is when they fell in love. And both families did not want them to marry. And so she lost her mother early in life, and then when she was 18, she lost her father. So she was pretty much raised by Queen Victoria. And Queen Victoria did not want her to marry Nicholas. And part of it that she did not like his father, and she didn't like Russia. And the Russian Tsar, Nicholas's father, he didn't like, you know, Alex, you know, and he did not like that she was German and she was Lutheran. So these two had to fight for their love. And so Nicholas was told that, you know, he cannot marry her. And at that point, you know, he was so much in love with her that he was telling his father that, you know, he would decide that to give up his, you know, turn to become a czar to his brother, because this woman was very important to him. So, and she did not want to convert to the Russian Orthodoxy. And eventually, he convinced her to convert, and his father gave him permission to marry her. And shortly after, you know, they got married, the father died, and Nicholas became a czar. They had many misfortunes. So, you know, when we talk about people born on eclipse and their life, you know, being fatalistic, I mean, there was many things that were happening in her life that she was completely, you know, out of control. First of all, you know, when you're born into royalty, and it's not always a happy situation for people, where you have to live a life that is prescribed to you by your families, you know. And so her role was to, you know, give an heir to the throne, and it has to be a boy. And so she gave birth to 4 girls. No, I'm sorry, 3 girls. 4 girls, right? And the boy was the last, born in 1904, and unfortunately, she carried a gene of hemophilia, and the heir to the throne was born with hemophilia. and it was his entire life, he was trying to, they were trying to keep him alive. And at that time, of course, they didn't have a cure for hemophilia, or there was no really good way to control this. And she got pretty much into, she also became, when she converted to Orthodoxy, she was very religious, and she was trying to learn as much as she could about her new religion, and worked very hard on convincing, Russian people that she was one of them. But the situation was really, really hard. She was not liked. She was not liked by people. She was not liked by court. And you can see here that the ruler of her eclipse is in the 12th house. It's a Mercury in Taurus. But fortunately, it's there is a mutual reception between Mercury and Venus, so kind of helps. I think it tells me to me that she was trying, really hard. But she had to, keep the dynasty alive, and that was her job. And unfortunately, she connected to this healer, Rasputin. I mean, the guy had a really terrible reputation, but somehow, the history at least tells us that Rasputin, was able to heal the boy, and he was giving access, to a prince. He was giving access to Serena, and in a way, he became the ruler, the guy who was making decisions for a family, and he was the one who also got involved in Russian politics. The other reason that she was not liked, because she was German, and at the time, the World War I started, and Russia was in the war of Germany.
Lana?
So lots of things against her happening at the time.
Lana?
Yes?
We have a person asking about the North Node situation here.
Yes?
About her North Node would mean she has something to develop, and it seems like she has a pretty rough life, as opposed to her South Node.
Right. Absolutely.
Someone was asking a question about that. If you could talk about that just for a minute before you go on.
Sure. If you look at here, that she would have to develop the North Node. It's in Gemini, and for her, it's a communication. Okay, and she had to become, fluent in Russian, and that was very difficult for her, and she had to become also someone, who could influence, Russian politics. And unfortunately, her influence of Russian politics was not great, because while Nicholas was, I think at one point, he left for the war, right? And she was basically in charge, and she let Rasputin make decisions on firing some of the Russian ministers. And that was not well taken by the government. But I think it's in the first house, she had to become a leader. She had to develop her leadership skills. And unfortunately, it didn't work well for her.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question. She has a mutable. Eclipse, whereas Marx had a fixed eclipse. Is there any difference then about what real influence she had that this would not be as much historically as Marx?
I think the history comes not because of mutability, or I think that wouldn't make a difference. I think her she had to, as a mutable person, she had to adjust. I think this is how I interpret her eclipse, where Marx, his fixity comes in his ideas. At least that's the way I see it.
Lana, I have a follow-up question I was hoping you could answer, and that was, what would the difference be if she were born on a lunar eclipse, or excuse me, on the south node? So if you were born on this, as a person where she had to go,
Right.
how would that change, her life, if that were her natal premise?
Well, if she was born on the south node, it would be more using the skills that she already developed. And you could say if you someone who believes in the past life, or something that overdeveloped. The north node is where you have to stretch yourself more, living the things that are already developed in you. So for some people, that I actually have an example of someone who was born in a south node eclipse. Actually, my next person is a person born in a south node eclipse, and it's an astrologer. I don't know if you guys are familiar with him. Koch, Walter Albert Koch, and he was born on the south node, and it's a 12th house eclipse, right? So here's someone who is using his prior knowledge and prior skills to emphasize his eclipse. And he is someone who is very much into does it help?
Where the person go?
I'm sorry, did I answer your question?
Oh, you're talking to me. I'm sorry. I didn't realize you cut out there for a moment. So you said that this gentleman was born on. I want to know, if we all have a north node and we're all trying to develop
Right.
new skills, and we're born on the south node, does that make it more difficult for one to achieve or to go in that direction? Does that provide resistance or obstacles for that north node realization if one is born on the south node?
You know what? I think it depends on the person, and can you tell from a chart if they're going to go to the south node or the north node? You can just see where there's a heavier accent. So again, the chart is giving you a promise, right? But if it's going to be actualized, it's up to a person, after how conscious they are of their, spiritual development. And this is where, to me, the spiritual part comes. So if you go back to her chart, we see that this is something that her emphasis on the North Node and on the personal, on the development, on the individuality, right? And it looks like she was more focused on relationship, on her South Node, on something that was, she was relying more on her South Node than developing her North Node. And I think this is where her difficulty came. She was trying, but she wasn't really successful. There were lots of things that happened that were totally out of her control, that didn't help her to succeed. And, she was mainly focused on her family, on her child, and giving, Russia the heir, and the boy was sick, and she was all wrapped about him.
Thank you very much. Just one other question. Carolyn, you aren't muted, and I keep on getting noise from from you. If you could mute yourself, thank you so much. And thank you, Lana. Thank you very much. Excellent answer.
Thank you. And anyway, there are a couple interesting fixed stars in her chart. And one of them is Hamal, which has violence and cruelty, and Rigel, and Hamal is with her moon, and Rigel is also with her moon, and Rigel is bring knowledge to others, and I think she really tried, but I think just the fate was against her. And I think this is one of those cases that the person born in eclipse, that fate takes over, So I guess at the end, the Nicholas abdicated, and the family was living in, he abdicated in 1917, in March of 1917. And family was removed from the palace, and they were not in prison, but they were living in seclusion. And when the communist revolution happened in 1917, and the Bolsheviks took over, this is when they perished. In 1918, family Lenin made an executive decision that they were dangerous, and which is really, the danger was because there were the English family, and there were some other Russians that were trying to save them. And so they decided that they needed to be executed, and entire family was children and their servants. They were killed by Bolsheviks in the middle of the night. So that is a very sad end for Serena and the family. And I guess my next person was astrologer Koch. I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with Koch house system. And he was a mathematician and a historian, and started developing his astrological skills in 1924, and wrote many articles, and not just astrology, but were also he was interested in gems and other esoteric studies. And what I found was interesting of him, that he was, as other astrologers in Germany, excuse me, persecuted, and he ended up in Dachau concentration camp. And he survived, and he went to Dachau in 1941, and on September 18th, 1941, there was an eclipse right on his birthday. And this is very, interesting. And unfortunately, I couldn't find more information on him. So what happened in 1941, there was, Hitler started persecuting astrologers after one of his right hand, Hess, tried to defect to England. And, Hitler took this as a result of Hess being, heavily involved with astrology. And so all the astrologers were detained, and many of them were put in concentration camps. Another astrologer, a famous astrologer, Alfred Witte, committed suicide in August of 1941, and he would rather take his life than, go to concentration camp. But Koch survived, and after the war he continued working with astrology, and I was hoping to find more information because I was really interested in the topic itself, astrologists and Nazis. But I even asked my German-speaking friends, to research that, but I could not find anything else on him. And so I kind of resolved this as him, having his eclipse in the 12th house, being a very private person. And perhaps, it was something that he did not want to make public, didn't want to discuss, and he just rather concentrated on astrology. To me, this is very, interesting situation. And I feel very much related to him because his degree of his sun and degree of his ascendant are degrees of my sun and my midheaven. And as you see, he's also in the south node. So I'm looking at this as something where, perhaps someone who had very much developed skills as an astrologer, as an occultist. And he wanted to keep that, private. Another interesting situation, I had a client who was also in the 12th house eclipse. It was south node. And she was in the fixed sign of Leo. And at the time of my consultation, unfortunately, I can't bring her chart here because I didn't get her permission. But she had a birthday on eclipse. It was her 38th birthday, and we were discussing her career. And she was in a very difficult situation at the time because, coming from Soviet Union, she was a medical doctor. She couldn't practice medicine here because she didn't have a license. And it was taking her 10 years, to pass her medical board exams. And finally, when she did, she couldn't find residency. And at this time, she has also moon and sun in the sign of Leo in the 12th house. And we were discussing, her career opportunities. And she felt that, she was at the end of her road. It was a dead end. And she thought that maybe perhaps she could go and also get licenses in acupuncturist and, practice alternative medicine. But so what really happened with her, few weeks after our discussion, after her birthday, she had an opportunity to join a residency program in psychiatry. And she was not a psychiatrist, actually she was pediatrician. There was an opportunity. It was a hospital in a very, poor part of town. It was in South Central. It was a very difficult, program and dangerous place. But she wanted to be a doctor, and she took the opportunity and she finished the residency program. And interestingly enough, she ended up working as a psychiatrist in prison. So I just thought it was quite good description of her, having her eclipse in the 12th house. And and she didn't really see prison as some horrible place. She said that she quite enjoyed her work there, and she thought that she was not in any kind of physical danger. And as far as I know right now, she has her own practice, and I don't see much of her anymore. So she seems to be very busy. So I think this is an interesting 12th house, story. And so my next person is Prince William. I think you're probably more familiar, with William than anybody else. And so he has his eclipse in the 7th house in Cancer. And the way I was interpreting this as a sole intention to overcome old family structures that are no longer relevant and move toward creating new set of foundations for healthy and fulfilling relationships. And we all know that families struggled, with marriages and relationship. Specifically, his parents, their relationship was unfortunate, and things didn't work out for Diana and Charles, and she seems to be, not really fitting into the family picture there. But with William, I think it's very interesting how he so I just want to mention this, that his Sarah series is 2 Old Norse, and it's a new moon conjunct Jupiter on Mars Uranus midpoint, and Mercury is in Venus and Saturn. So this is a difficult eclipse family, as members being unfortunate news concerning friendships or relationships. This talk of endings and separation of unions, serious decisions about separating, which eventually lead to better outcomes. The theme of the eclipse is action concerning personal relationships. So I think it's very interesting how, he is really fitting into the story of the eclipse. And so this is the initial eclipse series. 2 Norse. And he is very fortunate to find Catherine, who I think is just a perfect fit for him. And so they're known as the Solstice King and the Lunar Queen. And you can see how this chart, these 2 charts, the synastry, it's like a hand in a glove here. And her sun and moon, her moon, is in his 7th house, and her sun is in his 1st house. And it's just, I think she's going to be a person who is going to help him to show that the family, the royal family is being taken to a different level, and first of all, she's not of a royal blood, and And so they are changing, they are adopting, and they are moving in a new direction, becoming modern, but at the same time, they still continue the tradition. And I think this is how I'm interpreting those eclipses for them. And I wonder if anybody wants to make any comments here.
I have another question. When you were talking about the Saros cycle, and you talked to, you had a slide about how to do it in solar fire and whatnot. Not all of the eclipses actually had a Saros cycle number attribution to them, or they had the number, but they didn't have the 2 north or 5 south or whatever it might be. Why is that?
Okay, so the Saros numbers, as I said before, let me just go back to that slide. Okay, so you could see here that not all of them have a Saros number, south or north, right? So the lunar eclipses, they do not have a Saros, or they call them the node. So they have a Vanderburg series, right? But in astrology, we use the second, they call this, see here that says J and B. This is Jansky-Brady classification. So that's the one that we use. And the lunar nodes don't have that classification.
Right, but if you take a look, all of these are solar. They're not, none of these are lunar.
Okay, this is interesting. Oh, excuse me. You know what? I don't know. I did not pay attention to this. You know what? I would need to research this. I'm sorry, I can't really answer this question. I know that the lunar eclipses don't have a Saros assigned to them. Yeah.
Is the only place that one can find, I mean, I actually studied with Bernadette Brady. I think she's marvelous. I love her book. And she gives a little bit of description like what you just provided right there. Is there anywhere else where one can find the Yablonsky or whatever that JMB stands for, descriptions about what these cycles mean?
I wish. I only found 2 places. It's Jansky and Brady. I could not find anywhere else.
Oh, I see. That's what JMB means. Jansky and Brady. I got you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And Jansky, you may have put it up there, so excuse me if I'm asking a question that you've already answered. Does he has a book? You must have put up there on one of those slides,
right?
At the beginning. Okay, and the descriptions are in that book.
Yes. Well, he gives you astrological description, and so, but he doesn't really give you interpretation. The only place where I found interpretation was Brady. And so his book is called Interpreting the Eclipses. And you can find on Amazon. And you know what, I think I have about 8 books on eclipses. And the only person who goes into the Saros cycle descriptions, interpretation is Brady. I could not find anybody else.
I mean, because her descriptions are helpful, but they're just not that elaborate. And
right.
I mean, I think you've done a beautiful job of incorporating in there, because I've seen them in the past, but I just never did anything with them, and it makes a lot of sense. Let me just ask you one other question. For Prince William, his Saros cycle ends, the one that he was born into, it ends in 2036.
Correct.
So does it start over again? How does that work? Or is that lineage forever, does it disappear, or does the way that the cycle originates, does it repeat and start over?
It will start over. It will start over, absolutely. It doesn't mean that his, life is ending, but
No. But will he be a part of that new serocycle or not? Is it's kind of like the lineage that he was born into in that energy? Presumably, if he lives a natural born life, I hope he lives beyond 2036. It's not that far away. But will he continue with that energy of that serocycle, or will he be released from it?
well, you know what? I don't think I can answer this question. I assume that when the new cycle begins, so he's going to be very much, the cycle, I think, gives you kind of like a history, a theme. And I think when the new cycle begins, right, and it might have a new theme for him.
Okay, but he'll still be aligned with it.
Yes.
Cindy,
Okay, that's
I mean, Laura, this is Spencer, and can you hear me?
Yes.
Cindy Ralston has sent in, she says, she's curious why you use Placidus, for example, when you're talking about Marx, because Porphyry eclipse would be in his third house, and it seems to work. And I'd like to add to that, have you seen any difference in which house system you use when you're working with eclipses?
I usually use, in my work, I use the house system of Placidus. And now I'm also doing lots of query work. I use Regimontanus. But, between Koch and Placidus, the way I look at the houses, if it comes really close to the cusp, I would use interpretation of both houses for the intermediate houses. If it comes within five degrees of the house, I would read 2 houses for the planet. And for people that born, in the northern latitude, it seems to me it's popular to use the equal house system. And anyway, I think the question of houses, is one of those questions that astrologers been trying to answer which one works the best, and everybody has an opinion. I was a student of Marian Marsh, and Marian used to say Koch only. I think that works the best, but I'm experimenting. And I also experimented with using Uranian astrology and not using houses at all. But I think for particular, cases of the eclipses, I think I would use Placidus or Koch.
Okay, one other question. We have a president who is probably being voted out, and he has an eclipse in his chart. Did you do any study on him for us today?
Here we go.
Okay, yay, thank you.
I just thought I'll keep him for the end. So, well, it couldn't be more, descriptive than he is, and for him, having his lunar eclipse on the 4th and 10th house, so I could say with the lunar eclipse, we could see it's a little bit different. So far, I think I just covered people with solar eclipses, but the lunar eclipse is a bit different. So now the focus is on balancing the past and the future. So for the lunar eclipse, we could see that he's pretty much using the resources that are already developed. And this is the 4th house. So his family resources, right? And moving on into the 10th house. And for, his career, for his standing in the world, And I find it's very illuminating here that some of these, sayings of the president, that everything in life is luck. And well, that's one of the few things that they say about people born on eclipse, that they're very fatalistic. So that's kind of descriptive. And also, one of his sayings, I try to learn from the past, but I plan for the future by focusing exclusively on the present. And this is where the fun is. So, this is where he's working. And the last one I find, money was never a big motivation for me, except as a way to keep score. The real excitement is playing the game. And so here we see the ruler of his moon, part of his eclipse, is a Jupiter, is in the second house. And also in the second house, he has Neptune and Chiron. So I think he is being very deceiving here, that money is not his motivation. So anyway, my next slide is what's happening with him right now. So I find this very interesting that the following two, the lunar eclipse and the solar eclipse, are continuing to work for him. And it seems like, he is at the point of, he's not going to give up. I believe that the show continues. So we're gonna hear more of him in next several months. And I find even more interesting, this is the last slide. And here we have going into 2021, and there are more eclipses that fall in his birth eclipse. And as you can see here, the 19 degrees of Gemini in June 10th. So, and also the solar eclipse of December 4th, 2021 at 12 Sagittarius. So it continues, So I'd like to hear if there are any comments on this.
I would like to ask a question. Since we have transiting Neptune squaring those nodes and the whole eclipse points, what effect does that have?
Well, more deception. This is how I interpret this. I think, I'm trying to be objective and I don't want to offend anybody, but it seems to me that our president very much believes his own lies.
Well, with the Mercury square Neptune in his natal,
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
muted it. Okay, can you?
You're being cut off. You're being cut off.
Do it. Okay, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. I think with the Mercury square Neptune, and I think that's the only aspect it has, is probably, you're absolutely, I mean, that indicates exactly that he believes his own fantasies.
Cornelia, could you repeat that one more time, please?
I said, I believe that the Mercury square Neptune in his natal chart, and I think that's the only aspect that Neptune has, indicates exactly what you said, that he believes his own fantasies.
I have a question. Not only do you have this eclipse, but we have the continuing opposition of Saturn and Jupiter to his Saturn Venus. How would you look at that in terms of ongoing situation that's in the eclipse field? Not that it's on the eclipse, but it's something that also deals with what's going on and the tension in his chart in the 10th and 11th house.
Well, I think to me it has to deal with a relationship with his own, party. I think there is a tension between him and his own party and his government.
I would add that he might have financial problems also, because all of these financial things about his taxes and the exposures of some of them in the Times has come out. He's got possible legal problems because of them.
Well, I also think that he was never transparent about his finances, and he's saying that he is a billionaire and I don't need money, and I'm
Right.
not. You can corrupt me because I'm so rich. But I think even if you look at his natal chart and the Neptune in the second house, and Jupiter, ruling his moon, it's a very, very sensitive issue for him. And he might have money, but he also has tons of debt. And also he is a person, known for not being an honest businessman, but his shady dealings. One of those was a Trump University, which was just a scheme,
Mhm.
Seen a couple of things recently in the news. Apparently, the state attorney general for New York has made some statement to the effect that I'm coming for you now.
Yeah.
And also, there was some indication that the Deutsche Bank, which has a substantial amount of his debt, may be calling in his debt once he's out of office,
Right.
because they can't sell it to anybody.
That's right. Mhm.
So yeah, he's he's looking at a really challenging period. Currently, I was just checking some things in it. At this point, he's saying he's not even going to attend the inauguration because it's
No,
not
of
going to be
course he
real. It's not
wouldn't.
going to be valid because he didn't lose the election. But we'll see how that goes. Some rumors are that Melania and Jared Kushner are both trying to talk him into conceding. But so it's going to be a very interesting time.
He would probably be better off if he resigned and let Pence pardon him.
Yes, and it may come to that. But there are some limits to presidential pardons because he cannot
Yeah,
pardon.
those are federal. He can't do
Yeah.
the state ones.
That's right. He can pardon him for federal crimes, but not state crimes. but he's probably not smart enough to know that, nor are his people going to be smart enough to tell him that. So yeah, I mean, his smartest move would probably be to take a trip to take a vacation, go to Brazil for the holidays, and
Yeah.
resign while he's there, get Pence to pardon him, and be happy in Brazil where there is no extradition treaty with the United States.
Hmm.
You know what I find interesting about the eclipses, because whenever you have an eclipse on significant points on planets, or points in your chart, then expect unexpected. And so here's the person who's being hit, with eclipses around 4th and 10th, and in 2 years. So definitely, we're saying that there's some family changes, there's some home changes, there's some status changes. I think if somebody wanted to say that, hey, let's say he won the election, right, and he is going to be, president for next 4 years. Let's say if things work in his favor, there's still going to be some changes, but and it's just going to be something that is not foreseen. And I think that's the message of the eclipse.
Oh, I'd like to ask you a question. I believe that same eclipse point is on Kamala Harris's ascendant.
You know what? I don't have for chart.
The one coming up, one.
Yes.
I think it is.
I noticed that because I thought, well, this is a beginning for him, but it's really a new cycle for her because it'll be going into the, what do you call it? The first house for the nodes. It's crossing her ascendant.
Let me see if I can bring her chart. Can someone give me her data, please?
Oh, gee, I don't have it in front of me.
Okay.
I can get it for you. Just give me a second. I'll pull it up.
Okay. And I think it's October 20,
Yes, it's in October because she's a Libra.
1964. I think she was born in Oakland,
Born in
California.
Oakland, yes.
And
Her ascendant is 24 Gemini.
what is her time?
She was born October 20th, 1964 at 9:28 p.m. in Oakland.
5 p.m. Oakland, California. Okay. Okay. Oh, it's very interesting. So December 14th eclipse, right? This, as you can see how I get into this. And okay. So we have here December 14th.
The December 14th is at 23.
23 Sagittarius. Okay, can you guys see my screen?
No.
I'm sorry. Okay, I think your screen sharing. I think,
Yeah, I see the Kamala Harris now.
okay. I just thought that maybe I got lost somewhere.
If you,
I think you minimize that Zoom window.
Yeah, I'm trying to
Oh.
close.
Lana, just click on the white space. There you go. You got rid of it.
Right. And I'm trying to close this one. Okay. So that should be okay now, right?
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. So I think it's very interesting for her, and the eclipse falls in her sixth house, but I would say that it's bleeding into her seventh house. I would just say that definitely, you know, changes in her relationship.
The Mars and Leo trine, it seems to me, really shows that she's going to be a lot more communicating, a lot more ability to have expression, especially with her Mars and Leo.
It's conjunct, her moon is conjunct Biden's moon.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. That's been one of their strong points, I think.
Mm-hmm. Well, she has Saturn on his Mars, on his south node too. I don't remember what his south node is, but it's the same as her Saturn sits on it, and that's up in the 10th, isn't it? Well, it's right on the ascendant, on the midheaven.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting that her part of fortune is right in the eclipse.
Mm-hmm.
So
Well, I always thought the difference, like Trump has a nodal return also, but his is in the 10th house and it has a lot of bad aspects to it. But hers is going into the node first house. So it's coming out of the 12th house into the first house and starting a new cycle. So I assume that she would be more out in the public.
I also feel that she might have more visibility than other vice presidents in the past.
Yes, certainly.
I think it's going to be really close relationship, and you know, she's not going to be someone who is in the background and just goes to visit the, you know, foreign diplomats, and I think her role is going to be very, very active.
Forgive my cat's tail here.
All right. Nice to see you're not alone. Yeah, I would say that with that eclipse falling in her sixth house, that she will probably be more involved in the day-to-day things than Pence has been, and typically for probably a lot of vice presidents. Some of them have been kind of like redheaded stepchild at the family reunion. They kind of like, who the heck are you? Yeah.
Well, Trump doesn't want anybody to take the spotlight over him. So.
Oh, of course not.
Well, but she has the moon, and I mean, Mars is in Leo, is going to be trining the natal, the transiting Mars, and it makes a trine actually to her work in the sixth house, but it's also 11th, third house aspect. So I think she's going to be a lot more communicating with the base, especially the progressive base, who, you know, she's the most progressive senator, and a lot of the progressives are already grumbling now about how much Biden will be too much middle of the road for them. And especially considering the fact that the Senate is still controlled by Republicans, I think she's going to have a lot more
yes,
exposure.
I agree with that. I think Also, if you think about this, whether it happens or not, will he complete his first term?
Right.
Yeah, that is a definite question.
Hmm. Because he said he's a transition president.
Yeah.
So we have to go through a a transition period before progressives begin to dominate.
Yeah, and I think that he will, unless there's some health event or something, or Trump supporters get carried away, some of the extremists, I expect he will at least manage the first term. He'll be almost 82 when that ends
Mm-hmm.
at the next election. And so he may at that point, depending on what the situation is, step down and let Kamala and somebody else take over. But that's, to be seen. We don't know where, we're still far
Yeah.
from dealing with the COVID and the economic crisis. I mean, the stock market is doing great, but that
Mm-hmm.
doesn't put food on people's table or pay their mortgages. It just helps the
Right.
rich get richer, theoretically.
And she's going to have her Saturn return. And
Okay. Let's see. It's going on 2:00. So, Lana, you want to get back to your slideshow and see if you can zip through it. Lana's going to make her slideshow available, so it will be posted to our Facebook page. And if any of you want a copy of it who aren't in Facebook, or send me an email and I will send it to you. Jimmy, JIMMY _Eddy, EDDY @hotmail.com.
Put it on the chat, Jim.
Yeah, okay. Oh, that's an idea. Gee, why didn't I think of that? Probably if I grab the right mouse.
While we're waiting, we have a question about Hunter's laptop, and if that's had any impact upon the election, or will it have any impact later on in the absolute attempt to disgrace the presidential elect.
Bada bing. There we go. I'll also send out the link for the video because I am recording this, assuming everything works as it's supposed to. Okay, Lana, back to you.
Yes. So I think this was my last slide.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. So I guess just in the conclusion, I wanted to say, do we think that people born on Eclipse are special? Yes. And I think part of this is maybe the way they react, to eclipses is stronger, more sensitive than people that are not born in eclipse. Are they fatalistic? Sometimes, and probably more often than people that are not born in eclipse. And do they know if they have a special purpose? I think it depends on their level of spiritual development. So I think eclipses will enhance everything that you see in the chart, but I think you also have to look at the chart as a whole, not just the one point of the chart. And I think from there you can conclude, how special the person is and how far they're going to get in their development. And I think this is all I have, and thank you guys for listening to my presentation.
Thank you, Lana.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you
Lana.
very
That was
much.
really good.
Thank you so much. That was incredible.
Yeah.
Uh,
Thank you, Lana.
Thank you very much, Lana. That was so interesting.
If anyone has any interest in exploring more eclipses and exploring them from the personal point of view, I'm doing another, it's going to be a workshop, a small group. It's going to be, I guess, 2 parts. One is going to be on next Saturday and the following Saturday. So you can find information on my website. So please visit my website and let me know what you think. And also, it's going to be much more in detail and much more in depth and more personal.
Lana, maybe you could take your thing down and we can have anyone that wants to talk to you now can be free to talk in on just.
Yeah, so you can end Lana, end screen sharing and then turn it back to me as host, if you would, please.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Great slideshow. Great.
Thank you.
Very good presentation. Thank you very much.
Let me see. I closed. Okay. And there's my face.
Can I ask something?
Okay, so Dwayne asked an interesting question. He was just wondering what our thoughts were, any reactions or comments about the Hunter Biden laptop, which supposedly contains all kinds of incriminating or questionable information. I've not seen any evidence come out to establish that it clearly was his laptop, that is the Hunter Biden, son of Joe Biden's laptop. And so I don't know if anybody else has been following that closely, trying to find out if there is, is this another made up story? Was it really his laptop? What was in fact found on it? The fact that the Bill Barr and the Justice Department really haven't done much of anything with it, if it were true, I think they would have, unless of course he in fact wanted Trump to lose the election, which wouldn't seem to be the case. But I don't know. Has anybody else heard anything one way or the other about the laptop, and is there really any evidence to establish that it is?
I haven't heard anything that it was. Yes, I thought it was one of those things that's questionable.
Yeah, it's kind of suspicious the way it turned up and the information that was on it. The fact that he supposedly dropped it off several months ago and never came back to claim it. I mean, it's just all so
right
odd. Yeah. Okay. There we go. So at this point, we really don't know. At this point,
no, and I'd like to study Barr's chart.
Yeah, that would be an interesting, might be an interesting chart to look at, would be Bill Barr. Not even, I don't know, does he have a chart? I guess he was born, so
I
he
have a question.
must have one.
Sarah cycles again. If I can ask. Can you hear me, Lana?
Yes.
Okay.
I don't have his chart. I was wondering a lot about it, how it fit with
Let's see, William Barr,
Trump's
born May
chart.
23rd, 1950 in New York. So he's a very early Gemini.
There you go. There's a chart right there.
Now let's, I don't know if he, see, does anybody know if he's in the Astro Databank?
He probably is by this point.
Someone
looking right
asking about my website address. You know, at the beginning of the presentation, on the very first slide, but I can just also type here.
Put it on the chat.
Yeah.
Put it on.
It doesn't look like he's listed in there.
How about that?
Mm-hmm.
You know, the last time we talked a lot about what the difference between Biden and Trump.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know you're looking. Can I ask my question or should I wait? Well, some of the things we talked about, you talked about, everybody talked about, was Trump's health. And it still might come up as a possibility, may it not? And this is just the thing about his narcissism and his deception. You know, he really does believe these things. He has a hard time. There's something in his ego that's so fragile, it can't believe something that he can't take in. You know, it was like Jung said, you have to have a strong ego, but a small one to take things in. If the ego is so big, it's so fragile it'll crack. So this is just a thought. Is there any parallels, like at the end, Hitler couldn't take anymore and committed suicide? Do we have any signs of that with Trump? Or considering his ego is really so fragile, it's so big but so fragile?
No, narcissists don't usually commit suicide.
Yeah, I think it would be highly unlikely that he would.
But I'll
do
tell you
something like
something they
that.
don't talk about. Yeah, but one thing about Trump is what they don't talk about is that many of his problems are related to the fact that he's ADD. He has a lot of distractibility in his chart, but he has no persistence. That's why he has to be juggling 2 or 3 things at a time, and why he can't pay attention, and why he couldn't read, and why he had some.
Okay, everybody okay there? Oh dear. Wait.